Got myself and Derek here as usual, ready to take on the week. So we're going to start off with a little bit of an injury report because there are a lot of significant ones going into this week. First one being Jaden Daniels, and he is going to be a game time decision going into this week 8 game against the Bears. Um, Quote from Dan Quinn is, "We will assess how he feels over the next 48 hours, but we really pushed it today." And knowing that, Jaden Daniels left in the first quarter with that rib injury, um, I'd like to say go ahead and, slot him in if he's going to play. But scary thing about that is being a rib injury, it could definitely cap his rushing upside. And honestly, one really bad hit could take him out for the rest of the game. So if you do have another option, I might highly consider that just because, considering what the injury is, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Debo was practicing following being hospitalized for pneumonia. It's looking like he is going to be good for Sunday night's game, and George Kittle is also likely to play. As far as Jawan Jennings, though, someone that I know could have been a hot waiver wire ad this past week if he had fallen to there, or people were probably just looking to play him, seeing how good he'd been in the absence of, Ayuk and Debo when either one was not out there. He's looking doubtful, and he's not a candidate to go on injury reserve, but he's not likely to suit up this week. Shanahan said expect him to get back after the bye week, considering this is week 8. The Niners do have a week 9 bye. Kind of makes sense for them. They haven't ruled him out for this week yet, but definitely would say he's doubtful. I'd be surprised if he won't be back after the bye week. So, just coming from the talk from Shanahan, it does really sound like he's going to be out this week.
Hmm.
Um, Tua was cleared to play. As we know, that is all systems go for Dolphins players you might have been rostering. T. Higgins is questionable with a quad injury. He was added to the team's injury report today, was limited during practice, and is questionable for Sunday's game. So it's definitely something to monitor, knowing T. Higgins' history with injury and playing with said injuries.
Yeah.
Um, Bucky Irving is being bothered by a toe injury. It looks like he's going to be questionable going into the game. That I think is pretty big because Rashad White, I mean, if Bucky Irving is unable to go, obviously Sean Tucker will see a little bit more of an uptick in work. But we saw what happened last year when there were pass catchers missing from Tampa Bay. That is when Rashad White took over as a top pass catching running back in the NFL. And I think we'll see some of that, especially if Bucky Irving's out. It'll give a little bit more of the workload back to Rashad White. And then just going through the rest of them, going to skim through pretty big one. Dallas Goedert will be missing with the hamstring. I already mentioned T. Higgins. For the Ravens, Marlon Humphrey is doubtful, and I mean that's not the biggest deal, but knowing how shaky Baltimore secondary's been, Jameis Winston stepping in. If you were taking a shot on Jerry Jeudy or a guy like Cedric Tillman this week, that could just mean a little bit better for guys like that. And then Nate Wiggins, their other cornerback, is questionable. Zay Flowers is also questionable with an ankle injury that we saw kind of limit him in Monday night's game. So something you also are going to want to track. For the Browns side of the ball, Jerome Ford will be missing, which, I mean, Nick Chubb's back. Still don't, we'll get into that game. But,
Yeah.
um, and then for the Titans Lions, L'Jarius Sneed is going to be missing this game, which is obviously better for the Lions pass catchers. Will Levis is questionable, so we don't exactly know if this is going to be a Levis game or a Mason Rudolph game. And then Tyjae Spears is questionable going into this game. For the Lions, we know that Jamison Williams has been suspended, so he will be missing this game as well as the next one. Moving on to the Cardinals Dolphins game, already said that Tua will be back. And then for the Cardinals, no real significant injuries that we would take note of. For the Jets Patriots, I mean, pretty much the same thing, except Alan Lazard is doubtful with a chest injury. I mean, I guess that's just a little bit more work for Devontae and Garrett Wilson. But and then Morgan Moses, their right tackle, is questionable with a knee injury that could have some effect. No notable injuries for the Patriots going into the Falcons and Buccaneers. Um, no one on the offensive side of the ball for the Falcons, and then for the Bucks, as we know, Mike Evans is going to be missing as well as Chris Godwin, Bucky Irving we talked about, and that's really about it. And then the Packers and Jags, no real significant injuries in that one. Jacksonville, Travis Etienne is still questionable with that hamstring. Definitely paying attention to that one. I mean, if he does play, it makes it a lot harder to gauge what's going to happen in the Jacksonville backfield. In the Colts and Texans game, no notable injuries for the Texans. And I mean, the Colts, not really any significant fantasy injuries. For the Saints, Cedric Wilson is going to be missing, as well as Derek Carr again. And then nothing for the Chargers. The Bills and Seahawks, Curtis Samuel is going to be out. And for the Seahawks, DK Metcalf is doubtful going into this game,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously, if you were planning on streaming Geno Smith, I think that kind of hurts his upside, and it creates a little bit more of an opportunity for Tyler Lockett and JSN, possibly Jake Bobo if you're really deep. Going into the Panthers side of the ball, where we have a laundry list of injuries, Deontay Johnson tops that. He will be missing this game with a rib injury. Adam Thielen will also be missing this game. Andy Dalton is now doubtful with the right thumb injury, still looking like Bryce Young is going to be starting this game. But and then it goes down. They're missing a lot of other just different position players, and Jonathan Brooks doubtful again in this game. We'll see if he ends up getting his first playing time in the NFL this week. The Broncos don't have any notable injuries. Kansas City, they're going to be missing Juju again this week, and Jalen Watson, their cornerback, is going to be out. Nothing for the Raiders, meaning we'll I mean, obviously it's a bad week, but we will see what the backfield looks like again with Zamir White and Alexander Madison. The Bears and Commanders, I mean, for Chicago, nothing too crazy. Obviously, Jaden Daniels for the Commanders is going to, I mean, change a lot. I think the Terry McLaurin start comes more into question with
Yeah.
Marcus Mariota, and he will be getting a majority of the tension of Jalen Johnson, who is currently the number one ranked cornerback in the NFL. And then the Sunday night game, which is the last one that we have any information for. Deron Bland, Micah Parsons, Jordan Phillips, all are going to be missing for the Dallas defense, which obviously makes a big difference. And then nobody really on the offense that we'd pay attention to. And then for the Niners, we talked about how Jawan Jennings is doubtful. That will do it really for the injury updates that we have. So we will take it right into our first game, which is the Ravens going into Cleveland to take on the Browns. Um, I mean, I think with Jameis at the helm for the Browns, it gives you a little bit of optimism that the Ravens will at least not be able to just sit back and run the ball in this game. We know Jameis likes to take chances. So there's the opportunity of, the Ravens having to keep their foot on the gas. So I think the Zay Flowers play, if you were liking what you've been seeing from Mark Andrews in the last couple weeks, he typically performs well against Cleveland. Not saying that that is prescriptive, but if, like I said, they have to continue to score in this game and throw the ball, then I think Mark Andrews is a decent play, as well as Rashad Bateman, who has continued to, you know, his involvement has been raising week to week. And I mean, we saw a career game out of him on Monday night. He got the 121 yards and the touchdown. Great game out of him. Um, then obviously Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, you're starting, throwing Justin Tucker in there. And I mean, it's hard to, especially on a week with no buys, say I think Justice Hill is any type of a good like flex or deep option. It's going to be tougher in a week where I think they will, regardless of Jameis being back. We know Jameis does, as well as the touchdown and big play upside. Also, it's a double-edged sword, and that could also lead to a lot of turnovers with this style of play. Should that happen, giving the Ravens a lot of short fields, I mean, we don't know which way this game could go. It could end up just a lot of Derrick Henry, a lot of running the ball, and running down the clock. So Yeah, there's that for this one. I think the Ravens defense is obviously a good start, and
Yeah.
on to you with the Browns.
Yeah, in the Browns side of the ball, obviously we know Deshaun Watson will miss the remainder of the year with that Achilles tear. So it's going to be Jameis for the rest of the season. Nick
Oh, and
Chubb,
I did forget to mention the over/under in this one is 45. The Ravens are favored by 8 points.
yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. It's going to be a tough matchup. Like, Schiff mentioned, Jameis does have capabilities of throwing the ball, capable of turning the ball over as well. But for the pass catchers, it does offer some hope. Deshaun has not looked good really the entire season. David Njoku is the one guy on this offense I would say should be an absolute start at the tight end position. And then when you look at Jerry Jeudy, you look at Cedric Tillman, who got hyper targeted last week. I think Jeudy should offer the highest upside. He'd not been targeted too much by Deshaun in the past 3 weeks, but I mean, really all of that goes out the window with a new quarterback taking the helm. So if you want to roll the dice with Jeudy, I think he's in consideration for a flex play in a 3 receiver format. If you're playing 2 receiver with the flex, I think you should have better options. And Nick Chubb came back. He played 36% of snaps. Really didn't have a great day, but he got in the end zone. So, it salvaged his day last week. This is a much tougher matchup. We talked about there's no buys this week, depending how your running back room looks. If you were solid enough without Nick Chubb, I would say to wait one more week if you are able to do so. I just don't know how much success they're going to have on the ground. We talked about Jerome Ford being out, so it's Pierre Strong and Deonta Foreman to spell Nick Chubb. I think he'll be the lead back in this one. Just how much that's going to generate, I'm not completely confident in, but it is good to see him playing again.
No, definitely.
But I mean, dude, that's it. The Browns offense is not very hopeful. And I understand why the trade happened, but if they still had Amari Cooper on this offense, I would feel slightly more confident with their capability.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I just kind of wanted to bring up is like I figured Jerry Jeudy with the name and the opportunity is probably going to be the more alluring pick or stash or whatever at this point. I just do think it's worth the mention to bring up Cedric Tillman. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
waivers have run. A lot of people still might not even have gone for him or grabbed him. I was able to get him later in the week in our Dynasty League. It just tells you how much people are, with reason, thrilled or not so thrilled with the Browns offense, even with Jameis Winston, just given what we've seen, and the offensive line didn't improve at all.
Yeah.
But Cedric Tillman is the name that I wanted to bring up, just given last week, their first one without Amari Cooper. He did see 82% of the snaps, which was far more than any that he'd seen in the rest of the season. Granted, from his rookie season to this point in this season, we haven't seen too much out of him. But like I said this past week, 82% of the snaps. He also got 12 targets, caught 8 of them for 81 yards. He was the wide receiver 10 on the week. So it is
Yeah.
worth a mention, especially just not knowing. And I mean, realistically, out of Jerry Jeudy in his NFL career, we've never seen him truly establish himself as a number one wide
Yep.
receiver. Even in Denver, it was Cortland Sutton, who it still is. He came to Cleveland, it was Amari Cooper. And now that Amari Cooper's gone, I mean, we still saw Cedric Tillman demand the most targets in that wide receiver room last week. Outside, of course, David Njoku is the number one option there. He is, of all of the Cleveland Browns, the only guy week to week I'm remotely confident playing, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
until, Nick Chubb gets back and super involved again. But that's just kind of where I'm at with the Browns. I'm keeping an eye on Cedric Tillman just to see if that usage and volume carries on. But yeah, I'm not throwing him out there by any means this week.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that one will be fairly lopsided. I think there's a lot more hope our next matchup, which I think could be a bit of a fireworks show. Hopefully, the Cardinals at the Dolphins. The over-under is 46, and the Dolphins are favored by 4.5. The Cardinals side of the ball, man. Kyler got it done last week. I mean, he absolutely did, mainly with his legs. His passing capability has still scared me. It's rough. Like Kyler, I mean, yeah, go out and start Kyler because, I mean, with his legs alone, he can give you incredible fantasy output. I brought up the passing mainly in concern to Marvin Harrison, albeit he did drop an insanely open pass that would have gave him a bit better of a day, but his past 3 weeks have not looked good. It just has not looked like they can throw the ball too efficiently outside of Trey McBride. Trey McBride's a clear start. Obviously, you're starting Marvin Harrison. Like, you can't put these guys on your bench, but as the weeks go on, and the Cardinals are kind of in a rough stretch right now of defenses they face, specifically secondaries. So just trying to navigate through it has been tough, but it on paper is another rough week for Marvin Harrison. But again, I'm just hoping we can find that what we saw in, weeks 2 through 4, the connection him and Kyler had, the capability to get it downfield and in the end zone. I'm hoping we can see more of that. And hoping, it's this week.
Yeah, just looking at Kyler's numbers throughout the first 7 weeks, there's only one game he has multiple passing touchdowns. There was the same game where,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the only one where he went over 250 passing yards. Every good game aside from that one that he's had has been on the back of his rushing ability. And in all reality, I mean, you take away the rushing touchdowns in the week against the 49ers and this past week against the Chargers. And Grant, it's a tricky game to play because it did happen. So it's like you can't really take it away, but it's like that's not prescriptive. A 40+ yard rushing touchdown in every game,
Yeah.
and we've seen it like the game in between, he scores 11.96 points. If he doesn't score that 44-yard rushing touchdown, that's 10.4 points of his 21.2.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know it's a little joke. The thing, I mean, even Sleeper made Kyler Murray's picture, that little guy that they've been using in the COD commercials, how he always plays worse after COD comes out, which it did just drop. And,
Yeah.
you know, but, and, when you look at the quarterbacks that Miami has played on the year, I don't know how. I mean, you might kind of have to take this with a grain of salt, but Miami is currently number 1 on the year against quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So just a few things that worry me a little bit. I think there might be a few guys that could be better starts than Kyler this week.
For sure. But, I mean, the Cardinals on the season have been very simple with who you start. James Conner, Maserati Marv, Trey McBride. Kyler, if you want to keep him in, if you want to pivot to someone that potentially has a better matchup, feel free to do so. But I mean, that's really it with these guys.
Yeah, and going over to the other side of the ball, I mean, we see Tua come back with that. Everybody gets the huge boost that we've been waiting to see.
Mm-hmm.
I just traded for HN in our home league. I think all of the Dolphins players, as long as Tua is healthy, go right back to where they were previously. It's as long as Tua is and can stay healthy. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too difficult. Arizona's defense hasn't been anything spectacular. I mean, Justin Herbert even passed for, I think it was 350 yards against them. Um, so I think it'll be a good day for all of the Miami guys like we have been used to. I'm not really thinking too hard on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm throwing to a right. Honestly, like, I think if you could grab Tua and get him on a spot start, that'd be good this week. And then, yeah, I mean, everybody else that even Raheem Mostert, I think, is a good flex option this week.
Yeah. Yeah. His volume alone that he gets when he's in, I would agree with that. It should be the much needed bounce back week, specifically for Tyreek Hill, that people took, top 5 in drafts, and it just hasn't been there.
No, definitely. And I mean, even with Achan going at like that 2-3 turn,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like even earlier in the second round, but this is what people have been waiting for, what I just traded for, hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Going into our next game, we have the Colts going into Houston to take on the Texans. The over-under in this one is 45, and the Colts are favored by 5 points. This is tough because, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is going to be playing in this one. I'm starting him. It's almost like you can get, there is still, albeit kind of gross, somewhat of a floor with Michael Pittman while Anthony Richardson is playing. The unfortunate thing is he's completed about like 10 passes per game as the
Mm-hmm.
starter. And it's like, okay, so say Michael Pittman gets four of those 10 completions. Like, yeah, that's great, but for like 30, 40 yards, like I said, he has a floor, but it's like you're just not very excited about it. If you need just somebody who's probably not going to zero you, then I guess it's not the worst play in the world. But realistically, if you want any upside from any of the pass catchers, it is Alec Pierce. Um, I'm not necessarily suggesting it, but hell, I mean, if you went into this week and you just played against Jettas and Cooper Cup or Puka Nakua, Kyron Williams, even Matt Stafford had a great game. If you started your week
Mm-hmm.
off rough, you're going up against one of the top team. You need a win to generate some points. Obviously, there's the possibility that he duds you, but I think Alec Pierce has the highest probability of even if he gets two of the 10 completions that Richardson is able to, throw, then
Yeah.
it's a lot higher of a possibility that those two go for like 102 touchdowns. And we have seen it before. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Colts and with that offense. It's kind of difficult. I mean, as for Anthony Richardson, we've talked about how I think there are better options just in general. I think there are 12, 10 better quarterbacks that you could start. Whether
Yeah.
or not they're rostered, that kind of depends on your league. If you're in a position where you need to start Anthony Richardson, we know he has the athletic ability to get it done on the ground, to possibly get a rushing touchdown through the air. We haven't really seen it. But if you're just relying on that, I mean, I don't necessarily hate it, but we know that the floor is low, that he can get you like 5 points, and the Colts still. I mean, I don't think they're going to win this game, but
Yeah. It's really tough, especially, in full PPR formats where you have two good receivers, Pittman and Downs, but it doesn't matter. And like you said, he's literally averaging like 10 completions. So that's absolutely terrible. It's there is no pie to go around. It's not even a small pie. There is no pie going around. So if you are able to unload Michael Pittman, like I know Schiff was just able to do, I would try to do it. Like if there's someone that believes he still has, a decent value, if he can get back to giving you 10 to 15 a week, let them take that risk, because from what we've seen from Anthony Richardson, it just doesn't seem feasible on a week in, week out basis. And I I think the Texans are going to do much better in this game, but talking about bad games, CJ Stroud by far just had the worst game of his NFL career. He threw 86 passing yards against the Packers and completed 10 passes last week. I it was terrible. Again, I think he'll be good this week. I think they will bounce back. Obviously, you're starting Joe Mixon, you're starting Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell's someone that's hard to keep out of your lineup, but it's scary. But again, CJ Stroud had a horrible week, so it makes sense. But Tank Dell giving you a fat zero when Nico Collins is not in the lineup is just unheard of, uncharted territory. Again, their offense looked terrible last week. I doubt that will happen again. Tank Dell, you probably are safe to start against this Colts secondary. They're not the Packers secondary. And Joe Mixon, I mean, dude, he was like he carried that offense. Like, absolutely. Joe
Yeah.
Mixon's been insane for the Texans in the 4 games he's played. But you start your guys there. I think Dalton Schultz, again, is going to have to sit. His highest scoring week is 7.4. Even without Nico Collins in the lineup, he's getting a couple more targets, but it's not really bearing any fruit of how it pops out on the other end. Jaime Fairbairn, absolutely start. And I mean, I don't love
Yeah.
starting the Texans defense in this one. They've shown they can, get some interceptions, get after the quarterback a bit. I just don't know. Anthony Richardson, he's a weird matchup to go against. He's not going to kill you through the air, but again, Jonathan Taylor, the return of him changes a lot in this game.
Yeah, and also honestly, like talking about Dalton Schultz, I don't even think he's rosterable at this point. You have
No, I
guys like
agree.
Hunter Henry that are only rostered in 41% of leagues. And, Frymouth rostered in 65%. There's definitely better options. And then my biggest concern with the Texans offense this week is Anthony Richardson. Is if he's not able to connect. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why the game was close with them in week 1, I believe, was the first time they played. Um, Anthony Richardson was able to connect on a couple of those deep balls and keep the game competitive. If he's not able to do that this week, I don't see the Colts finding too much. I mean, they're probably just going to stack the box, and I just don't see the Colts finding too many opportunities to score the football. I see a lot of short fields from turnovers and just a lot of Joe Mixon and a lot of salting the game away.
Yeah.
Hopefully Richardson is able to connect on a few of those deep balls and we are able to actually get some value out of Stroud and the passing offense. But like I said, it's one thing that we do have to keep in mind.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think this next game is another game that, I mean, this one potentially has what could be game of the week written on it, depending how it actually plays out. But the Eagles going to Cincinnati and taking on the Bengals should be a very good game. The over-under is 47. Cincinnati's favored by 3. And this is one of those games where, like, the preview is super easy to do because the Eagles are, like, one of those few teams where it's like you have the guys, you start them without question every single week. And the one guy I would question is Dallas Goedert, and he's out with the hamstring injury.
Yeah.
So there's no, sit and discuss how we think Goedert is going to do. Obviously, Hurts, Saquon, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, you play these guys no matter what. Devonta Smith did have an awful week last week against the Giants. But to be fair, they really didn't have to do too much. He's a guy that you keep in your lineup no matter what. He's gone really like 15 plus every single week outside of last week. I will say Jake Elliott is still rostered in 53% of leagues. If you have him, drop him. There's better kickers out there. The Eagles go for it on 4th down way too often, especially within field goal range, for you to keep rostering him. That's something
He's
to
going to
heavily note.
score an absurd amount of points this week now.
Dude, if he does, he does. But he has kicked
But it's
more.
kickers. So it's like,
But the reason to bring it up is because, you've seen weeks where the difference is the kicker. So don't keep playing a
no,
kicker that's going to
definitely.
get you,
Definitely.
5 points a game.
I agree with you. The same with kickers and defense. It's like don't keep beating a dead horse. Like
Mm-hmm.
move on. You don't need to be attached to those positions, especially. It
Yeah.
doesn't do you any good.
But that's it for the Eagles.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Start up your Eagles. Not really looking too much into that Devontae Smith game from last week.
Yeah.
Eagles didn't really need to throw the ball anyways. Going into the Bengals side of the ball, I think there's a little bit more question just when it comes to the running back room, but I'm starting Joe Burrow, starting T. Higgins, starting Jamar Chase. Obviously, paying attention to that T. Higgins quad injury. If he is unable to go, I mean, I guess Andre Yoshivas is a decent spot start, but
Yeah.
don't expect anything insane. I think he's a decent floor play if T. Higgins is unable to go.
Yeah.
And Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I mean, we didn't really see really anything too great out of either one of them that last week. Um, Chase Brown had 44 yards on, I forget how many carries.
15. They did not run it well.
Yeah, no, they didn't. And I mean, we still saw him get the bulk of the snaps and the carries. I think if you're in a position where your running backs are injured, whatever the case may be. Yeah, I'm just not forcing a Bengals running back into my lineup
Mm-hmm.
this week. I mean, granted, the Giants and the Bengals are not the same, but we saw the Eagles do a very good job of bottling up the run game last week
Yeah.
against the Giants. And just with that bit of unknown, I don't necessarily like the matchup. Um, I think Chase Brown is flexible, but I'm just not actively encouraging you to force like Chase Brown or Zach Moss in your lineups this week.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really, and then, you know, um, what's his name? McPherson
He's been bad.
obviously is,
He's been
yeah,
missing a lot of field goals lately.
but that's another, it's not necessarily, I mean, Tucker started off the year missing pretty badly. He's been a
That's
solid
fair.
option the past few weeks. It's kind of harder with kickers to, it's just, I mean, this game, 47.5 point over under could be a lot of
Yeah.
just high flying scoring, which is something that you'd hope for. And there's also a possibility in this next game, but we're going to really need to see how the injuries in the wide receiver core affect the Bucks and their ability to move the ball. But we have the Falcons at the Buccaneers, which the last time we saw these two teams meet in Atlanta, we got a wonderful overtime victory for the Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that I wanted the Falcons to win, but there was a whole lot of scoring in that game for anybody who had players in that game. Starting with the Falcons side of the ball, Kirk Cousins has been fairly disappointing since that football game where he went
Mm-hmm.
off. I think got like 50 fantasy points. Hasn't really done much since then. I mean, granted, we saw a couple really good games from their rush attack, but I'm a bit worried that this might be another one of those games if the Buccaneers aren't able to really get
Yeah.
their offense to work. Um, Regardless of that, I'm still taking. I'm still taking Kirk Cousins as a decent spot, like decent start this week. I'm I'm not gonna go out and pick him up and start him over Kyler, just because there is that chance that the Bucks aren't really able to move the ball, and we just see a whole lot of Bijan and Algier. Which, by the way, I do think that Algier is flexible this week. I think he's a decent option if you need it. Just because I think the possibility of the Falcons getting up and running the ball a lot in this game is
Mm-hmm.
a bit higher. The Falcons are favored by 2.5 points. Over unders 46 in this one. So I mean, there's a chance of it. And then Drake London, you're starting. I think Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, you're starting. And I mean, yeah, like Bijan is an obvious one. Like I said, Algier I think is decent, especially if they're able to get up and run the ball a lot. Then you'll see a lot of good production out of him. Younghoe Koo is a go every week. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'd start the Falcons defense even with the injuries because I have faith in Baker as a passer and just the ability of that offense to make something happen. So I mean, I think that they can score some points, and they're not like Baker's not exactly turnover prone.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And it's tough because Baker's been, in my opinion, like he's been the hottest quarterback fantasy wise these past 4 weeks. He's gone over 28 3 of the last 4 weeks, and the other one was against the Falcons, and he was over 23. I mean, he's just been unstoppable. And then his by far number two or top two targets both go out. It's just, in my situation, I have Baker and Jordan Love, and I've been rolling
That's not even
Baker.
close this week.
Yeah, it has to be Jordan Love.
Yeah.
It has to be. But no matter the matchup that Jordan Love had, it was going to be Jordan Love for me. I looked at this wide receiver room without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin. You're looking Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Trey Palmer. I mean, like Jalen McMillan should be the highest fed target of these three. He saw 8 targets last week, but he caught 3 of them for 15. Sterling Shepard had that touchdown. His second game we really saw him. He's been okay. Trey Palmer, I'm not considering. Cade Otton, I think, is the one that's going to benefit the most. He's been getting a lot of targets. He had a great week against Baltimore this past week. I think Cade Otton can be a good start. I'm hesitant. I think Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard should be rostered. Should they be played this week? I'm not completely sure. Again, we talk about there's no bye this week. Hopefully, and more than likely, you picked up Jalen McMillan and Sterling Shepard this week. You just brought them on your roster.
Yeah.
So it's like you should have other options to play. I like them being rostered, but I like them sitting this first week. I want to see how it shakes out. This is a decently favorable matchup. I don't know how confident I am in those 3 receivers until I actually see them go out and perform. And I have a lot of faith in Baker, but I do think this one could be a bit rough for that offense. They can't run the ball crazy well. It's just...
They have been better in that fashion.
They've been better. They have been better. But we did see this past week, and again, they played the Ravens. It's a great rush defense. But I don't know, dude. There's so many question marks about this offense. Like, yeah, Bucky. If Bucky plays, obviously it hurts Rashad. I like starting Rashad either way. Like you mentioned, I think we're going to go back to seeing him get, 6-7 targets out the backfield. If he can scamper into the end zone, either on the ground or through the air, it makes it an even better day. But his pass volume alone, he should be able to get it done. If Bucky plays, I like playing Bucky as well. And if Bucky does not play, I don't think the Sean Tucker play is the most far-fetched thing. I think if Bucky's out, he's going to get good run in this one.
And he's a decent pass catcher as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, I think the greatest beneficiary from, the unfortunate injuries is Rashad White.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if, you look back after the next 3 weeks and then see maybe 2 out of 3 games where Rashad White has double-digit targets.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's where I'm at with that game.
Yeah, and this next one, again, should be an easy-ish game for the Packers. It's the Packers going into Jacksonville taking on the Jags. The over-under is 49. Packers are favored by 4. The reason I said that is because of how they had just performed against the Texans. Jordan Love, I do think, is a good start this week. Josh Jacobs. This is the first game.
Jordan Love is QB1 this week.
It's very possible. This Jacksonville defense is not very good. And if there's one thing Jordan Love does, is he throws touchdowns. Every single game, he's thrown at least two. He threw 2 touchdowns in 2 games, 4 in 2 games, and 3 in the other. He throws a lot of touchdowns, and I don't see why that would change in this one. Josh Jacobs is a great play. Is this not the first week that the 4 Packers receivers have all been completely healthy going into a game?
Uh, Probably not, but it feels like it.
it,
I think last week, but
yeah, yeah, it's it's a tough one. I think Jaden Reed is your obvious start. Romeo Dobbs does seem like after he got suspended by the team for that game, he's come back out and just been the wide receiver too. He led the team or led that receiving core in targets this past week. He got 10. I think those two I like playing. It gets hard because there's so many mouths to feed in this receiver room. Christian Watson had a pretty dud week. He also didn't play that many snaps. The same with Dontavion Wicks.
I feel like it's kind of solidified in Green Bay now. Like we kind of know that, Tucker Kraft has his role and he's going to get targets as the tight end.
Yeah.
And then Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs are the two main guys. And then it's kind of a dart throw of Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks of who
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get that game. They kind of seem to split that wide
Yeah.
receiver 3 role type. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. Is they're more of a, like, in this matchup, I like it because one of them is going
Yeah.
to score. One of them is going to score a touchdown, if not two.
Probably so.
Which
Yeah.
one? I don't know.
Yeah. It makes it tough. And yeah, Tucker Kraft should be an absolute start. And you know what? I think Brandon McManus could be decent this week. Should be a high scoring matchup. And I mean, outside of that, the Packers defense is worth bringing up. They're still number 3 in fantasy. This Jacksonville offense, we've seen their struggles. If you believe they're going to struggle and that will continue, I don't mind the Packers defense.
Yeah, I don't either. I am a little more hesitant. Just, like after last night, we saw what happened to the
Number 1.
Vikings defense, number 1 defense. They only put up 1 point. I mean, some of these things happen if you're unable to cause those turnovers, and
Yeah.
that's kind of, I look to like the Lions defense this week against the Titans, teams that are having like maybe the Chargers defense against the Saints, teams that are having a lot harder time actually moving the ball in general, so
Yeah.
on and so forth. But going over to the Jag side of the ball, we've seen some good things out of the rookie Brian Thomas Jr. He is currently sitting at wide receiver 8 on the year, and I'm at the point with him where he's just every week start. I mean, I've said this for a couple weeks now, but I'm not even really thinking about it that much. I'm just leaving him in the lineup. Like, bad games will happen, like last week with Malik Neighbors, for example. Does that mean I am thinking about benching him? No,
Yeah.
happens to everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm still rolling with Brian Thomas, still rolling with Evan Ingram. Was kind of disappointing last week. Ended the first half with 4 catches for 34 yards, and then gets 1 catch for 1 yard in the second half.
Yeah.
Things go that way sometimes, as annoying as it may be. But I'm still starting him this week, and honestly, I, as far as comfortability, and if I have the assets, that's as far as I'm going with Jacksonville this week. Unless
Yeah.
Travis Etienne is unable to play. If he does play, I'm not starting any running back in the Jacksonville backfield. I think it is going to be a muddled mess. Um, I mean, I just don't know because Tank Bigsby has been running the ball very well through the tackles. But as we saw in the game they played the Patriots, when they were down 10-0, Tank Bigsby wasn't getting any work. It was Dearness Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see the Jags being up in this game. So it makes it a bit difficult. I think if you're in the position where, some injuries can back you into a corner sometimes. And I mean, I think if Travis Etienne doesn't play, then Tank Bigsby is a good start regardless. I mean, he is able to help that offense move the ball in general, and especially earlier in the game when, it starts off at 0-0, so it's going to be close at some point.
Yeah.
So I think during the closer portions of the game, he will have an ability to make something happen. Hopefully, the Jaguars are just able to keep it close. But yeah, that's and like Christian Kirk, I just can't right now.
I
He
agree.
has kind of faded into the abyss a little bit. It is definitely Brian Thomas Jr. leading that receiving room.
Yeah.
And that will take us into our next morning game, the Jets going into Foxborough to take on the Patriots. Honestly, I don't understand this. The over and under is 41. The Jets are favored by 7 points. I don't know what this team has done or shown to be a 7 point favorite. They have one more win than the Patriots, and they got kind of blown out by the Steelers. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that is not a high powered offense. And this is supposed to be a good defense. And the Steelers put up over 30 points on them. So
Yeah.
I just I don't see why they're favored by 7 points. I mean, granted, the Patriots have been fairly anemic on offense a lot of weeks, but I think they look a lot better with Drake May, and they pose more of a threat than 7 point home dogs. That's just not.
Yeah.
Anyways, getting into the fantasy, Aaron Rodgers did have a good game against the Patriots last go round with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. I mean, I think um, it's one of those where, like, we saw a good performance out of Matt Stafford last night, and I think from now on he's a decent option. But even then, like before the game, going into it, knowing who he had, we've talked about the fact that you should have your starting quarterback this week. And even if you don't, like, for example, Caleb Williams against Washington, I think is a better option. I
Yeah.
think if Tua is out there, him against Arizona is a better option. Like, I think Aaron Rodgers is startable, but unless you're in a really deep or a super flex league, I don't think you need to force him in your lineup this week.
Yeah.
That being said, Brees Hall, automatic. Um, Devontae, I'm
Yeah.
starting him. I mean, we saw him get the targets last week. I think it could definitely start translating into him being an every week, kind of high end wide receiver two option.
Yeah.
And then Garrett Wilson, I'm not shying away from at all. He's staying in my lineup. Um, and then that's really, we talked about Alan Lazard, doubtful with the chest injury. And then Mike Williams has kind of fallen off the face of the earth. Obviously, he's a trade candidate, but or a real life football trade candidate. I'm not telling you to trade for Mike Williams. But yeah, so that's pretty much where we're at. You could start the Jets defense this week. Like I said, I just feel like the Patriots offense offers a little bit more than what Vegas is giving them this week. And just seeing what the Jets defense allowed last week, I think the Patriots can put up some points.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. Drake May has shown, I mean, he's thrown 5 touchdowns in his 2 games. He's averaging right around 260 passing yards. So, I mean, he's actually giving us some hope for fantasy on the Patriots side of the ball. For his pass catchers, yeah, it's been Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas as his main two. Hunter Henry's gone double digits these past 2 weeks. He had a great game against Jacksonville. I think targets alone for a tight end, he will get you what you want. So if you, I mean, at the very least, Hunter Henry should be rostered. He's coming into the point where he should be rostered. He's getting the volume that we want to see. And Pop Douglas apparently was sick, and we didn't know it, but he got hyper targeted pretty quickly. He got 2 catches for 14 yards, like almost instantly against the Jags, and then was only targeted one more time. But it showed early on that Pop is going to get looks from Drake May. I think he's a good flex candidate on this week. And the only other guy we're going to talk about is Mondre. Didn't have a great week against the Jags. It was a favorable matchup. He was coming back from that toe injury or that foot injury. He's been logging full practices this week. He should be a go. If you have the capability to keep him out, I don't know how well they're going to run it. The Jets do have a solid defensive line. I believe Hassan Reddick is going to play in this one.
Yes, he is.
He will be back as well. That is a huge addition to that defensive line that they have not had all season. So if you can avoid Mondre, I would do it. If you have to play him, like myself, roll him out there and hope we can see one of those good days we know he's capable of giving us. But I mean, that's really it, dude. I'm just happy we have some hope. We have things to actually discuss on this Patriots offense. And our last game, there isn't much to discuss. On the Titans side of the ball, it's the Titans going into Detroit. The over-under is 45. Detroit's favored by 11.5. Oh, it is bad. We know the Titans dealt D-Hop to the Chiefs. Will Levis is questionable with that shoulder injury. We don't even know if he's going to go. Tyjae Spears has been limited with that hamstring injury. We don't know if he's going to go. I don't think there's a boost if Will Levis plays instead of Mason Rudolph. I think there may be more of a boost with Mason Rudolph. But it's ugly either way. Like, what are we talking about, you know?
I mean, if anything, the only thing that is the downfield opportunity, but
yeah.
eh,
I mean, you want to hear one of the most ugly stats you can talk about is the past 2 weeks, Calvin Ridley has 17 targets and he has 3 catches for 42 yards on them.
yeah, and it's like you have to look into how many of those targets
We're
were
actually even
actually
catchable.
catchable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about it, man. Like, honestly, like, one of the leagues we're in, I picked up Calvin Ridley, and I think I dropped Juju. Just like a speculative. They're like strength of schedule for quarterback and wide receiver for the rest of the season is like the best, but it's one of the like y-
It's tough.
we need to see something. Yeah, it is tough, and I mean, we saw like goodness out of Will Levis last year with DeAndre Hopkins. There were flashes, there were games where all of that went. I don't know, but it's nothing I'm trusting. Kind of just like if you have Calvin Ridley and just stashing him on the bench and waiting to see what happens with this great schedule.
Yeah, genuinely, the only Titan I would start this week is Tony Pollard, and it's not a great matchup for him. But,
Nah.
like, you know, if you have to start him, you start him. Calvin Ridley, you've gone double digits one time this entire season. I can't throw you out there. I just can't do it right now. So, I mean, that's really it, dude. The Titans offense, it's
Yeah,
just
it's
not good.
abysmal. It's horrible. Yeah, I mean Tony Pollard, he scored under double digits last week. I think we could see, more of the same out of him this week, unless he got 6 targets last week. He was only able to reel in 2 of them for, I believe, negative yardage, which it just tells you something about the pass attack and the fact that you can't really even hit the running back for positive yardage. There's just not much positivity to look forward to. I mean, there obviously will be better weeks, and against Detroit, it's going to be tough. But yeah, I mean, if Tony's able to reel in a few more of those passes, you could see a decent week out of him. But I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just going to be tough in general. This offense is just so bad. I
Yeah.
I don't see much improvement anytime soon. But on the other hand, we have the Detroit Lions, who that's an offense we like.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be missing, like I said, Jamison Williams this game and the next game. He violated the performance-enhancing drug policy of the NFL, apparently. But I think,
I like that you said apparently, like he hasn't already like been suspended. Like,
oh no, well, because did
no,
you see
I
his
know.
response?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because he said he was like, I'm basically like, I'm going to take this on the chin, but I didn't do it.
Isn't this his second time?
No, gambling, first time, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, first suspension was gambling.
He's filling it up.
Um,
It's
yeah, he's adding different ones to the bingo card for sure. Uh, um, but I mean, I think Jared Goff has given us reason to believe in him again. Granted, this might be a tough matchup just due to the fact that they might not need to pass the ball at all.
yeah.
So we might just see a whole bunch of Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery.
Yeah.
And you're still starting them on Raw. I think Sam Laporta with JMO missing
Yeah.
is startable, especially this week. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
hope to God without Jameson Williams in there that we see something viable this week. But yeah, I do think this is one you could put him in. He might go for a long touchdown and might get more than 2 or 3 targets. But yeah, I mean, not really like, Tim Patrick or I'm
No.
just sticking with my main guys. And then
Allen
who's
Robinson?
there? Stop. Who's their kicker?
Jake Bates.
Jake
I was looking at him. He's gone double digits twice. He hasn't missed a field goal, but the Lions are another team where he's kicked like twice as many extra points as field goals.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
eh,
Like he has games like last week against Minnesota. I mean, he got 8 fantasy points, but they scored 4 touchdowns. Only kicked 1 field goal. It's just he's had multiple games like that. Seattle, he kicked 6 extra points. Didn't even
I
attempt
will
a field
say
goal.
I would prefer because like there's game I've seen and it's obvious there's games where you take chances on kickers, they put up 1 or 0 points because the offense just isn't able to do anything at all. I would definitely prefer a guy like Bates
For
where
sure. For
you,
sure.
you at least
I
know you're
agree with
getting
this.
extra points over nothing.
Absolutely.
So if it comes to that, if you don't have a guy like Aubrey Tucker, Seibert right now,
Hmm.
then a guy on a team that's going to score points like Bates, I don't mind at all. And then the Lions defense, they're
Yes.
favored by 11.5 points,
Yes.
and they're playing at home against an offense who has no identity, really. Yeah, it's just gross. So, yeah, Lions defense should be one of the better performers this week. But with that, we are going to leave you guys,
Hmm.
take a little break, come back with the afternoon and night games.
Hmm.
So, as we say every time, come back next time, take more ups with the first team.
Yes, sir.